Welcome back to Why Blank Lost. I'm David Bloomberg, and it's time for us to do the podcast I thought we were going to do last week. Joining me, of course, is my co-host, Jessica Lewis.
Hi, and I'm fascinated by that introduction.
Well, because last week I thought that Geo was going.
Oh, I see.
Yes.
Yeah. So, yeah. We don't want to remind everyone who did go home and who was right in her prediction previously.
We don't want to remind.
We don't want to rehash that painful memory for you.
No, because I mean, both of us were wrong this time. So
that's what I'm used to.
Yes.
The fact that I get to gloat and be like, I was right, doesn't happen very often. So I will definitely remind you of that.
Yes.
As many times as I can.
Yes. Now, we are actually recording one day early this week in celebration of Rob Sesternino's birthday. Happy birthday,
Happy
Rob.
birthday.
Although nobody will hear this until a day later after his birthday. But happy birthday, and then when you hear this, happy belated
birthday.
Yes.
See what we do for you, Rob?
That's right. Well,
we stay up super late on a Thursday night.
That's right. It's still his birthday as we're recording.
Sure.
So, yeah. But getting back to Geo, what we saw on Wednesday night's show made it seem like, in the words of one listener on Twitter, this podcast would almost write itself. But even in situations where things seem obvious, there are complications. And it got even more complicated with his interviews. It's funny because last week, Lindsay's interviews kind of enlightened us.
Yes.
And this week's Geo's interviews darkened us.
I love this term.
But luckily we have a path to figure it all out by comparing Geo's game to Rules for Winning that I originally wrote way back after season 1 and have been updating ever since. We'll look at all the non-spoiler information available to us from what we saw on TV, those interviews, social media, and secret scenes. And you know what? We'll get to an answer. Now,
I hope.
We will. Once we get into those rules and discuss Geo's interviews, I'm just going to say ahead of time, I don't want it to seem like we're picking on him, which is kind of telegraphing, some of the thoughts about what he said in the interview. But we do have to look at the logic and what we actually saw and compare it to what he has said. And a lot of what he said, quite frankly, doesn't make sense. We know that, as he said, we don't see everything on Survivor. We've discussed that here before.
Sure.
But the words he said and the actions he took that we did see don't line up with what he said in interviews.
Yeah.
And I also feel like there's some 20/20 hindsight going on.
Yeah, I did. I read the interviews and was left scratching my head more than I would like to be doing after I read those interviews. Sometimes that happens, and those are things that we discuss. But I really felt more confused after having read them. So we will certainly work through it. And we're not trying to pick on him at all. We're just trying to figure out why he lost.
Yes.
And in order to do that, we have to go through what he said.
Yes, and dissect it piece by piece. But before we get to that, before we get to the rules, we always have things to talk about. Last week, it was almost all Vesey all the time. This week,
who's Vesey?
Exactly. What? Yeah. I guess they have to balance, There was a lot of Baca and, of course, Coco. Now, I want to start with Coco, even though we'll be talking about them quite a bit throughout the rules, because there is one person who really screwed up, but what he did doesn't come into play for the rules, even though he's the one who caused them to go to tribal council. And of course, I'm talking about Ryan throwing the challenge because he was so sure they'd be voting out Cassidy.
But did he really throw it? Or did he just do terribly and then decided to say he threw
I know that's a debate. I think he really threw it because there was no indication. I mean, he threw the ball right at the other two.
I know he did, but okay. So I will say this. Obviously, I've never performed in that type of challenge.
You've never thrown balls?
Not like that, up the ramp and
okay.
having,
Yeah.
So I don't know. I mean, it appeared that it took some finesse in order to do that. And so maybe he really did just throw the ball and it went in the wrong spot and knocked the other balls off. I had a moment where I was like, oh, when that happened. And then afterwards, when he was like, so I threw that challenge, and I was like, oh, what? It's like both of those moments were shocking when all the balls fell. And then when he said that, and then I was left scratching my head going, well, now wait a second. Again, scratching my head. This was a very this whole episode and all the interviews that followed, all just confusing. Because really, and I know you were going down a path to talk about Ryan, and I'm taking over,
okay.
but
what
the hell was he thinking?
Oh,
I mean, if he really did decide to throw the challenge, how do you do that as a one-man decision and then decide to tell the person that you believe are running things with, like, oh yeah, this is why I did that? The whole thing was.
Oh, but did he even tell him? I don't think he told him during the episode.
No, we didn't see that. But in his interviews, Geo said that he told him after, and
no, he told him before. That he told him before that he was thinking of doing it.
Oh, okay. So he had mentioned it, and this is what I remember. He had mentioned it in passing, but they hadn't really revisited it. But then after the challenge, he tells Geo that I threw the challenge, and Geo was like, but I'm on the bottom. Why would you do that?
Yeah.
And so I just feel like there's a whole lot of miscommunication happening, because if you think that that's going to be like a bold move and you're going to really change the game, you better have some people behind you, like, trying to do the same thing, because we've seen challenge throwing before, and we've seen it be kind of a group effort, almost comical to, watching some people throw a challenge, but it's usually more than just one person that's made that decision.
Yeah, usually. Although there have been times where it's one person, and often that person goes home. Ryan almost did, but yeah, I think he really did throw it, in part as evidenced by Geo saying, yeah, we had talked about it. And I have more on that discussion later. Like, why didn't you throttle him immediately and say no? But and also I have some answers, I think. You can help be the judge on that. But as to whether what he was thinking when he did it. Like you said, you have to have people behind you. Well, he believed that he had people behind him. So, yeah, he was going to put this on his resume. So you're going to wait until the finale and then say, hey, remember when we voted Cassidy out pre-merge? That woman that 2/3 of you don't even know?
Right.
That was because I threw that challenge without telling anyone.
Yeah, I don't.
Everybody's going to be like, what? Who?
Yeah.
So, yeah, building the resume, people, stop it. Just stop it. But, all I could think of when this happened, and in fact, I tweeted it at the time, was nothing against Ryan. But at that moment, I just wanted them to vote him out because he threw the challenge while believing he was in control. It's just so perfect when that happens.
It is. And then also the behavior that came after was so incredibly strange, because it was like he had completely convinced himself that what I want to have happen will happen because I've thought that it should happen, instead of like actually discussing things with the group. He was directing them, and terrible acting. And just,
are you kidding? He deserves an Academy Award.
Oh my
for
gosh,
that
it was
acting.
so uncomfortable to watch. And it was this really, really, and then the tribal council, it got worse when he was like, oh, if it's me, I understand, and they should vote me out if they want to be stronger. And like, even Jeff was like, what is happening right now? It was so over the top that it was
just
go on,
Cassidy. You must go on without me. Please, leave me here. Leave me here to die. The wolves can take me. You just must go on.
Very theatrical. Yes. It was very strange. The whole thing was strange.
Yes. We saw our own little Shakespearean play.
That was fantastic. I love it.
Yes. So, leaving that behind for a moment here and moving over to Baka, we had a different saga, kind of another Shakespearean drama in a way. We had Janine finding the beware advantage, losing her vote, regaining her vote, getting an idol by telling almost everyone, fooling Gabler, then going to Advantage Island and losing her vote again.
Yes, there was a lot of things happening with beads again.
Yes.
And losing votes and again, everyone just sharing with everybody what's happening. Like why Sammy got looped in, I have no idea.
Well, they think they're working. They've said for a while that they thought they were working closely with Sammy.
Sammy's fantastic because he's just working everybody.
Yeah. Now, Owen, I mean, that was, talk about beautiful moments.
Yes.
Owen walking up on Janine and Ellie, just as Ellie says, we don't want to tell Owen. Hi, Owen.
Those are things that you do not say when you're at the water well, because chances are someone will show up.
Yeah. And he's like, what you got there? Nothing. Oh, good job. You fooled him about as well as JD with the clue with the extra vote hanging out of his pants.
I do love that Owen is in such an incredible spot in the tribe because it's like he's not even trying because he doesn't have to. He's there, he's present, he's supporting everyone that speaks to him, he's involved in the conversations, but it's like he just gets to sit back and watch all of these things unfold. Because they're just all happening, and it is incredible. It's absolutely incredible because the game is kind of happening around him, and he's like, "I'm good. I'm just gonna watch. I give you my blessing." Yeah. Like the whole thing is so much fun. It's so much fun. I am enjoying him immensely because it's like it's just coming so naturally to him because he doesn't have to involve himself in all of the drama and all of this stuff that's happening, but he gets to watch it.
Right.
It's great.
Yeah, and then, speaking of, this would be us watching it, the look on Gabler's face after Sammy told him what had happened. Wait, we just gave her a fake idol? No, you gave her a real idol. What?
So Gabler's now upset because they've gone through his bag. They tricked him out of the pretty bead he wanted to make for his daughter's bracelet, or put on his daughter's bracelet, and ended up giving her an idol. And so he is just going to be so angry at both Ellie and Janine because they have just continued to run amok and mess with him in all ways. And I can see him just swirling and thinking and scheming and plotting against them right into the merge.
Yes. Now, all of that, everything we just discussed, paled in comparison to the moment when Janine told the whole tribe about losing her vote and seeing Sammy in the background trying to hide his smile, like just trying to hide it, and then leaning back and surreptitiously fist bumping Owen. Now, Owen's fist wasn't out, so he fist bumped his knee, but just him doing that, I didn't even notice it on first viewing, but on the second viewing, I was like, okay, this has to be my first Survivor TikTok of this episode.
I love it. And this is why I'm so baffled about the oversharing. I get it. You go to an island, you go to a whatever, an excursion of some sort, and everyone assumes you come back with something or you don't come back with something. How did they, number one, miss her when she first got off the boat? And
they were all sleeping. When she walked by, they were all just eyes closed.
I know, but were they really? I mean, it's like the boat had to have made some noise coming in. And she's like right next to them. She's like, I'm going to go sneak over here and look at what I have. But I don't know. I just feel like there's way too much oversharing happening. I get it if you believe that you're working with certain people, but so does she think she's working with everybody then? Because she shared with everybody.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know why she doesn't just give the standard line of, I didn't risk my vote.
Yes. Oh, and by the way, I just want to throw this out there. I had suggested that we should start a drinking game every time you see Janine with a new Band-Aid on. And it was actually mentioned in this episode by someone who was on the trek with her.
I think it was Jessie. I think
Band-Aids all over. She's got a scar.
Yeah.
I'm like, this poor girl is beaten up. So I just thought that was amusing. I'm like, even the tribes have noticed that there is a whole lot of bandages happening for poor Janine.
I mean, it's hard not to.
I know there's so many.
Yeah. All right. Well, do you have anything else that you want to discuss before we move on to the rules?
I think really Ryan was the takeaway. Ryan really, that was awful.
Ryan was the giveaway.
Yeah, that was rough. That was definitely rough. So no, I think we can get into it, and I'm sure we'll be circling back to some of that.
Oh yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, before we see how Geo did, the rules, of course, that we're about to discuss come in a shorter and much more colorful version in poster form.
Beautiful.
And you can go to robhaswebsite.com/yxlostfeed, scroll down, get to the poster, and click on it. And when you click on it, you can order it, and our shipping department will rush it out to you.
Yes, I will.
You're giving away that you're the shipping department.
I think they know that by now.
Yeah, I know. You can also order the poster on a T-shirt, or the checklist on a T-shirt, or of course a mug, or a sweatshirt, or whatever.
Ooh,
whatever
so many
you
things.
want.
Here, look, I have one right here. I have one of the.
Oh, hey, there you go.
Yay! Lovely.
So again, go to robhasawebsite.com/yxlostfeed and click away.
Click, buy, support, love it. It's great. Sorry, I'm a little sleepy.
That's okay. Well, as I mentioned earlier, what we saw on TV made it seem pretty clear why Geo was voted out. But there are always nuances and additional pieces of information. In this case, we have statements from his interviews directly contradicting some of what we saw and heard from him on the show. So we're going to have to dig in and work through some logic puzzles as we present all the evidence and go step by step to figure out why Geo lost.
I think it's pretty simple. I think it boils down to, is it cassava? Is that how you say it?
Yeah, cassava.
It's all about the cassava. That's it.
So you're saying that's the root of the problem?
Oh, look at that. Look what you did there. Yeah.
It's possible I had that one planned for later on, but
I love it. Yeah, so that's definitely an issue.
Yes. But that will have to wait several rules because we start with the first. Right. We're actually starting with rule 1. The first and most important rule is to scheme and plot. And Geo did that from the start, as he should. There was a secret scene from day 1 where Geo told Ryan that he wanted to align with him, and they indeed became a very solid duo. He also made what appeared to be a tight connection with Carla, and they bonded in a way that he felt she was 100% on his side. Little did he know she was actually in a good spot with everyone on the tribe.
Right? Carla's killing it.
Yes. But as far as he could tell, he was in a solid majority alliance with James added to the mix and with Cassidy and Lindsay on the outs. With that in mind, he'd been working on his master plan to vote out Cassidy for a long time. Now, even when things didn't go that way last week, they still voted out Lindsay, so Ryan felt like his alliance was completely in control, as we heard him say time after time after time. In his mind, he had no reason to doubt it. At least that's what we thought. Then when he did his interviews, as we said, there was that contradictory information. And he said he knew Carla wasn't with them.
Yeah.
This is where I have to be blunt and say that just doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
As I mentioned earlier, I feel like this is a case of 2020 hindsight because there are just so many things he didn't said to indicate that he, in fact, did believe Carla was with them.
Yeah, I mean, how can you think that you have a majority if you don't actually think you have a majority? He was very clear, and not just to people on the tribe, he was telling us, the
Mm-hmm.
viewers, that he's in control and that he's running the show. And then to find out that he actually thought he was at the bottom. That's what he kept saying throughout his interviews,
Right.
that he was actually at the bottom and he was really worried because he was at the bottom. But that wasn't what we saw on television. That wasn't
Nope.
what we heard. And I was thinking, did I miss something? Because when you're in the confessionals, that's usually where you get the most honest assessment from people as to where they feel they are. And he kept saying he was running the show.
Yeah. So I wasn't quite sure where we should discuss the logic and facts on the ground to compare to what Geo said in terms of Carla being with him or not. But I think this rule makes the most sense because it deals with, well, whether he believed he had successfully schemed and plotted. Right. So I'm going to take on the prosecutorial role here.
Ooh.
Yes.
I like
Exhibit 1. The look on Geo and Ryan's faces as Jeff read the final vote.
Oh, I have that too.
Yeah. And it was, for anyone on video, it's this, which is basically just their jaws on the tribal council floor. Yes, there's there we have an image, a picture of it. Yes. You do not make that look.
And then we have Ryan.
Yes. You do not drop your jaw like that.
Yeah.
If you already thought Carla was not with you, that's a surprised face, not a, oh, I knew it face.
Right. Yeah. That's not a, we thought that you weren't, and that just confirmed it. That was a, oh my, we didn't see that coming. And even Geo at the tribal council itself, when he was talking about not really knowing what's happening and where the vote is going to be, that also would make one believe that he really didn't know what was going on. And so, but then he was surprised. So he still thought that he had the majority, even though he said he's confused. So all of it doesn't make any sense.
Right. Now, there are a number of other similar instances of Geo and Ryan doing or saying things that contradict the idea that Geo knew where he stood with Carla. That being that he knew he was on the outs. There are too many quotes about him thinking he was in charge for me to list them individually. I will, submit those to the court as a packet. But
we'll mark those as an exhibit. Thank you.
Yeah, maybe some of them will make it to the court of TikTok. But one in particular that I do want to highlight is a situation similar to what you were talking about. He was discussing what happened on his journey to risk his vote. He specifically said on the show that he knew he was safe and protected by his alliance, but he had to lie a little bit so Jesse and Janine might help him and not risk their votes along with him.
Right.
This is not something that could have been taken out of context. This is not something that could have been taken from another episode.
Right.
If he truly felt like he was on the bottom, why was he saying that in confessional?
Right. Well, that's what I'm saying. His confessionals, they go against everything that he said in his interview. And that to me is very telling.
Yeah. So then another topic is when he was asked in an interview about appearing so confident, because again, he did appear that way on the show. He gave the answer that there's so much more we don't see. Okay, he's right. I don't have an argument with that. We've talked about it before, but that doesn't address him saying those words on multiple occasions.
Right.
What we don't see does not negate what we did see and hear him say.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's not like he said, well, I had to pretend to be on the bottom so that they wouldn't risk their vote. And then they cut, and then he continued, but I really am on the bottom. So I didn't have to pretend.
Right.
I mean, that wouldn't even make sense.
Yeah. No, all of it is definitely strange.
Yeah. Now, another point here is that Geo felt so close to Carla that she was the one he showed his advantage to first. In his interviews, he framed it as trying to demonstrate that he trusted her.
Yeah.
But again, that's not what he said on the show, which was he was just going to tell, quote, his alliance,
right,
quote, my alliance. Now, we'll discuss that overall situation of the advantage in Rule 7. But for now, what's important is, again, how he framed the situation.
Right.
All right. Now I have another exhibit here, Your
Oh,
Honor.
my goodness. There's so many exhibits. Before you go on to your next exhibit, sure. I just want to jump in here a little bit with the
as long as it's not an objection.
No, I haven't objected yet. I don't know if I'm the judge or the defense attorney at this point. I can't really tell, but
yeah.
But the issue with Carla as well, which I think is incredibly telling, is that if you want to garner trust, and if you want someone to trust you, and so you want to share, because we see this a lot. This does happen in Survivor. I think the presentation of it is a little bit different. One, I think there should have been a conversation with Ryan, because Ryan is the person who is your number one. And if you are going to be sharing information because you want to lock Carla in, it might have been a good idea to, I don't know, check in with your alliance and been like, hey, what do you think about this? And then the way that he actually approached her and told her about it, that's, again, not what we saw. We didn't see someone who was saying, I want to share with you because I want you to know that I trust you and you can trust me. It was just, I'm sharing information with you, as we've seen a lot of people oversharing in this season. So I do question that very much as to, now I think this is one of those hindsight is 2020 and I wanted to prove to her that she could trust me. But really, I think that he, based on everything that we've seen thus far as your exhibits are concerned and the arguments you're putting forth, it does seem like he really believed that she was with him.
Yeah. All right. So moving on to that other exhibit, it involves behavior that was not specifically Geo's. Now, as you just mentioned, he was tightly aligned with Ryan. Nobody has doubted that. Ryan, as we discussed, threw the challenge under the belief that he and Geo were in the solid majority. Ryan even gloated about it in confessional, again, as we talked about. He said he knew Jeff was going to say Cassidy would be the 5th person voted out of Survivor 43. Coming soon to a TikTok near you, by the way. Why would Ryan be so certain if his tight ally, Geo, thought Carla wasn't with them?
Right.
Was Geo hiding this information from his tight ally? I mean, I know, as we also discussed, he said in interviews that Ryan had brought it up to him and he was against it. But some of his responses made it sound like he didn't put up much of a fight. Like you said, they just kind of glossed over it, or he said, But telling Ryan, no, you can't do that because Carla isn't really with us, would have been a good way to stop him.
Right, exactly. And this is why it seems like there was no checking in and there was no confirmation. I really have the sense that both Geo and Ryan were just kind of accepting this idea that she was with them and just kind of believing it. But, I mean, really, that's not what was happening. So kudos to Carla, because she's pulling off working both sides so well.
Yeah. So, at least for this portion, I'm done with exhibits, and I have to conclude.
You didn't lay a proper foundation for any of those, I'm just going to say.
What? Objection.
What are you objecting to?
You. You can't handle the truth.
Oh, you went there. I like it. It's good.
My foundation is solid. Rock solid foundation.
You in grave danger?
I have no idea what that means.
Is there any other kind? Come on, it's the same movie.
Oh, sorry. I only remember certain lines, But so my conclusion for this is that despite what Geo is saying now, he did not realize Carla was against him when he was out there, like you said. Now, Stephen Fishback famously says that exit interviews are not canon. And I famously respond that he's usually incorrect, and that we often get very solid information.
Mm.
But in this specific case, I have to agree with that sentiment. I think, and this is at this point we move into speculation, Your Honor.
Ooh, okay.
I think Geo may have had some doubts earlier in the game, and it was reasonable for him to do so. But then when Carla and company sided with him and Ryan to vote out Lindsay, I think his mind was put at ease and he felt Carla had picked her side.
Yeah.
And that was why we saw him and Ryan being so confident in this episode.
Yeah, and I think that is a fine argument to put forth. I do tend to agree with that. I think it was interesting that he still opted to vote for Cassidy last time as like a backup plan.
Well, it makes sense. You always want to.
Sure, it does make sense. But again, it doesn't seem like there was any discussion relative to him still voting for Cassidy. Mm-hmm. That sounded like it was a rogue move. Like I decided I was still going to vote for Cassidy just in case. So what I feel like ended up happening was almost like this overconfidence in both Geo and Ryan in how they were playing the game, because they were so clearly aligned and they were working so closely together. Everybody saw it. It certainly wasn't a secret. And I just feel like their confidence level just got way too high and they got way too comfortable. And you have to give props to the way that Carla and James are playing the game, because they are allowing that. It's like they're fostering that belief,
right,
and just kind of leading them to the edge of the cliff so both of them can fall off.
Yeah, I do want to be clear. I am not accusing Ryan of lying. I'm sorry. I'm not accusing Geo of lying, Ryan either, but Geo of lying. I'm sure there are all sorts of mixed up emotions and feelings and thoughts and timelines when you're out there. He may have felt like he was in danger for quite a while. This may be how he remembers things now. It just doesn't match up with the other information we have.
Yeah, I mean, when you have so much time to sit and think about what happened on the island, and you revisit conversations and you look at things a little bit differently, and you can kind of create a narrative in your head as to what you think ultimately happened, even though it might not have come out that way. And there is this claim that so many people make, and I know it to be true, that you don't see everything in the edit. And so you do have that kind of catch-all where you can say, well, you didn't see everything, but let me fill in the blanks. Unfortunately, his filling in the blanks just ended up causing more questions as opposed to answers, where we've already said, like, Lindsay helped us because she filled in a lot of the blanks, whereas he's adding to things that are completely contradicted by what we have seen, versus Lindsay, where she was straight up like, you didn't see this, and it wasn't contradicted by what we did see.
Right. Yeah, he's not filling in the blanks. He's overwriting what was already there.
Yeah.
And so, yeah. Now that we have that as settled as we can for the moment, at least for ourselves, one more thing to finish up this rule. Carla was letting Ryan and Geo think that they were running everything so they'd get comfortable. And it worked, such that, as you already mentioned, it's the second week in a row where the person voted out was out-schemed by Carla.
I know. I love this.
Yeah.
She's so great.
And, that's the thing about someone who's in the center of everything without the others realizing. She just has everyone's trust in her hands.
Yeah. She's like a quiet puppet master. I love it.
All right. Well, we can move on to the second rule, which says not to scheme and plot too much and to keep your scheming secret. And once again, we have some contradictions between what we saw on the show from Geo and others compared to what he said in interviews. Now, Geo talked in his interviews about how he was surprised that he was portrayed as being bossy and giving orders because he's actually shy. But he also said in interviews that he tried to appear strong and secure so he wouldn't be viewed as nervous and paranoid. I think we have the heart of the issue here. It wasn't just that he showed or was showed a certain way on TV, because other people talked about it as well. So you can't blame the editing, like, oh, that's how they showed it. Well, no, because Carla said multiple times over the course of at least 2 episodes that Geo was playing a quote, I call the shots game.
Yeah.
That's not editing. That's what she was saying.
Right.
And she was describing what she saw out there with no editing.
Right.
And Lindsay also mentioned in her interviews last week how Geo started coming across stronger as well.
Yeah.
And so I think that it's likely an issue of perception.
Well, he used my favorite phrase,
he did.
Perception is reality. And I do think that sometimes you might not know how you are being perceived. And if you are struggling with how people perceive you, I think that you have a tendency to kind of overdo. If you think that people see you as shy and potentially weak, as he was concerned he was going to be viewed that way, you might have a tendency to be a little more boisterous, a little more. Yeah, you're going to overcompensate for those insecurities. And I think that's something that's a very natural reaction, especially in a game like this. You're playing where people are judging you. You're trying to not get voted out. You want people to play the game with you. And so you're constantly very aware of yourself and how people are potentially perceiving you, which can then work against you because you become something that you might not be. And if you don't know how to be in charge and make it appear as if you are comfortably in charge, then it takes on a different form. Someone like Carla is running the show, but you don't see her doing it. Right. You don't know she's doing it. She's doing it quietly from the back and making things happen. And so it's a strange phenomena where you just don't know how to actually be in charge, but then you're like, I'm running everything. And you're actually not. And you're just frustrating people when they see you acting this way.
Yeah, I think I had a boss like that. But anyway, I'm retired now. I can say those things.
You are retired, so that is completely acceptable. Yeah. I will allow it.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, I mean, yeah, I totally agree. I think he came across differently to others than he was intending. But even in his closing words, he said he might have played a little too hard.
Yeah.
So again, those were his words.
Yeah.
And he acknowledged in his interview with Mike Bloom that he was getting a little comfortable. I think all of that plays into what we, and more importantly, his tribe mates were seeing from him. And looking back, he just is not seeing it himself.
Right. Yeah, I mean, he's kind of reverting back to, well, that's not who I am, and that's not how I was. And so he might be missing the observations that other people were making.
Yeah, it's hard sometimes to look at yourself from the outside.
Sure. Yeah.
Like people always say, David, you're right. And I say, oh, no, come on. And they say, no, David, you're right.
Of course, we have to go back to this.
And so then I finally just grew to accept that, yes.
You just were like, okay. I
mean,
fine.
Right there. So. All right. Well, the third rule tells players to be flexible.
Wait, time out. We have to go back to that rule for 2 seconds.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I thought for sure you were going to mention this as well.
I think I know what it is because I think I know what I forgot.
The obvious duo?
Yes. I was writing my notes and I was like, I forgot to put that in. I need to put that in. And then I forgot to put that in.
That's okay. That's why I'm here. I'm like the backup, right? Yeah. So, I mean, and we've talked about it already, that he and Ryan were a very obvious duo. And so obvious that they didn't even care that they were obvious because they thought they were in charge of everything. So clearly that's overplaying really, really right out the gate.
Yeah. Yeah. And it actually leads nicely into the third rule because it tells players to be flexible. And I'm going to, set this up to you so you can spike it. How flexible do you think Geo was?
Not flexible. He was like dead set. I'm dead set on Cassidy going home because of some cassava. That was it. Decision made. Why did he have it out for this woman? I don't know. And then the interviews cleared it all up. It was that damn cassava.
That's
and
right.
How he was. Is it cassava? Am I saying it wrong?
I think it's cassava, but Dalton's interview had cassava.
Oh, see, that's where I cheated. I took a picture. So it's Dalton. Dalton did that?
Yeah, but they also
I'm
use
going to
a
blame
voice.
Dalton Ross then.
Well,
Thanks,
they
Dalton
they
Ross.
they use a voice to text and sometimes get things wrong there. They
Listen,
don't catch it in
I'm still
editing.
going to blame Dalton Ross.
Yeah, no, that's what
Come
I'm
on,
saying.
Dalton. Help me out here, okay?
Yeah. Of course, it could be one of those words that's, could be spelled a couple
I'm going
ways
to
in
look it
English.
up right now.
Okay, you do that.
Because I want to
Meanwhile,
know if it's cassava, because this was a big deal. This was what we
mhm.
heard about all over.
So in the meantime, while you do that, I'm just going to mention that
It is cassava.
yes, I
EW,
said.
fix your. Oh, come on. Cassava. That's a big difference.
It is.
Anyway. All right, I'm moving on now.
So he suffered from some of the same issues we've talked about, quite frankly, from others earlier in the season. He had the people he believed were in his alliance, and since he thought he was in the majority, he didn't even try to work any strategy with the other two.
Right.
As you said to him, Cassidy was always the target. Lindsay was with Cassidy, so she was not to be trusted. And so that left him completely dependent on Carla because he had no other options.
And again, this goes back to the 6-person tribe issues. Like, you are so limited in what your options are, and it should not be that limited. It really shouldn't be. I just think 2 tribes is the way to go. It's my humble opinion.
Your humble opinion, which is shared by millions.
Yes, so. It's just like because I feel like you're almost giving the players a handicap to start, right? Because they're like, okay, well, there's only 6 of you. Good luck. Figure it out. You know, I mean, you got to try to get a majority, and that's 4. And then the other 2, you're like, wah, wah.
Yeah.
You know, it's really not. I don't prefer that at all.
Yeah. All right. Well, we can move to the 4th rule, which tells players not to let their emotions control them. And this goes nicely with his lack of flexibility because you were just talking about the cassava. And, based on his own interviews, he wasn't getting along with Cassidy. And now we'll actually talk about cassava more in Rule 5. But
so much lead up to cassava.
I know. Well, it is the root of the problem. But, the point here is that when he got mad at her, they had this argument. He walked off. Then he goes right over to Carla and Ryan so he can vent to them. This gave them valuable information about the divide that could be used against him because he was mad.
Yeah. Well, and interestingly enough, this should have been a red flag because he goes to Carla and Ryan and says, oh my gosh, this cassava issue that I'm suffering with over here. And Cassidy, oh my word, if you can do your acting again, that would be lovely. And then what happens? Carla goes to Cassidy. And how does he know that Carla goes to Cassidy? Because Cassidy comes back to Geo.
Yeah, that I was like, what? What is going on here?
Right.
Why,
and so at that point, if that happened in that way, he should have realized very quickly, maybe Carla's not. And he did talk in his interviews about how, well, that made me realize Carla wasn't with me.
Right.
But I don't think that happened that way.
No, that's exactly the problem because he was like, oh, that's why I knew Carla wasn't with me.
Yeah. But you thought Carla was with you so much so we got the.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Go back to our arguments in Rule 1 there. Yeah, but after speaking of arguments, after the argument with Cassidy, anything she said to him, quote, didn't feel real. It didn't feel like she's being honest to me. I knew she didn't like me. So, okay, I mean, yeah, it was pretty clear, but that immediately cut off the avenue of ever working with her. As we just discussed in the 3rd rule.
Right.
He felt like she was targeting him, so he targeted her. Of course, she probably felt like he was targeting her, so she targeted him.
Right.
It's that same chicken and egg problem we discussed before.
Yeah. Yeah. Cassava.
Well, now let's talk cassava in the 5th rule, because as if we haven't been already. It reminds players they need to pretend to be nice and play the social game. Now, we just discussed how Geo's argument with Cassidy impacted the game. And what was the reason for that argument?
Cassava.
Yes. We saw on the show last week that he was criticizing her for the way she was cutting it. But what he said that what actually happened was he was the one doing much of the food preparation. And she commented, start chopping it differently so we could feel like we're eating something different today.
Yeah.
And the way he described it makes it sound like she walked up and gave him an order.
Yeah.
I have to say, we have seen nothing from Cassidy to indicate she would act that way.
Yeah.
To be fair, Survivor is stressful.
Oh,
Obviously,
yes.
you know that more than I do.
And food issues are always a big deal.
Right. It's certainly possible that the editing just hasn't shown this side of Cassidy. But it sure seems to be in direct conflict with what we have seen, including a secret scene of her this week meditating. So if I had to guess, and I guess I do, I'd say she probably made a mild comment or a joke because let's be real, cutting it differently isn't going to change a whole lot.
Right.
It really just sounds like someone trying to make a humorous comment. Like, hey, we're eating this lettuce all the time. Can you chop it a different way so we, feel like it's something different? I just think he took it seriously and blew it up from there.
Yeah. And I will say that you become creative with what you do have while you're out there, and you try to find ways to cook things differently, to chop them up differently, to turn them into something that they're not, because you are very limited in your supplies and what you are able to eat. So I would tend to agree with your assessment that she probably did make some comment just relative to the food itself. And again, you're tired, you're hungry, you haven't been able to really relax, and then somebody is saying something about the food. Your knee-jerk reaction is probably going to be like, oh, I'm trying to do something here, but you can't do that because it's Survivor.
Right.
And so I think it's just, again, you're reading the room wrong, you're not understanding what's being said, and then all of a sudden it turns into this whole cassava drama that it doesn't need to be.
Cassava drama.
Cassava drama.
Coming
By
soon
the way,
on CBS.
Toasted coconut is delicious. I'm just going to say.
Yes, it is. I haven't had it out there, but yeah, I think Janine was making toasted coconut in this episode. She had like the pot with the lid on, and she had coconut on top of the lid.
Oh no! You chop it up in little pieces, and then you put it in with some a little bit of water from the ocean, so you get the salt, and then it's like popcorn.
Ah, okay.
So good. But yeah, so chopping things differently, cooking them differently can certainly make a big difference. But it doesn't need to lead to so much drama.
No. Looking at what he said in interviews, he acknowledged that when she said that, he was tired. He felt he did the majority of the work. He didn't even get to eat sometimes, etc. Now, I had just mentioned Survivor can be stressful. I think it was Geo who may have blown things out of proportion, as we were just saying. He called Cassidy's behavior a tantrum. But it seems pretty clear that Carla and James didn't see it that way, based on their willingness to not only continue working with her, but providing her with information about what Ryan and Geo were saying still.
Right. Yeah.
So, yes. The sixth rule warns against being too much of a threat. And obviously, Geo was a huge threat to Cassidy since, he wanted her gone. But it really wasn't up to Cassidy. It was up to Carla and James. So, how was he in terms of being a threat to them? Well, I do think that Carla felt that Geo would pose a threat to her in the future if they voted out Ryan instead. Because that was up for debate right up until the last minute. They might be able to control Ryan now, but no way they would be able to control Geo in a merge situation if they took out his closest ally.
Yeah, and I think that that's a great point because this is the time of the game where people are definitely thinking merge is coming and who can we rely upon when we get to the merge? Is someone going to potentially flip? And I do think if they had used this moment to take out Ryan, Geo would have been a huge, huge issue for them going into a merge.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, nothing to debate in terms of his interviews in that rule. So we can move on to the seventh, which covers idols and advantages, game mechanics, and the like. We've already talked about how Geo tried to convince Jesse and Janine, that's a lot of J names, to let him have the advantage without any risk. But I think what's more important is what he did after that, which we also had mentioned, run directly to Carla after lying to the tribe overall, which, we already noted was a sign of his true beliefs. And then as soon as Geo read the knowledge is power advantage to Carla, I knew. I tweeted, I bet Carla's going to switch the votes back to Geo now. She doesn't want him to have that. Lo and behold, poof.
Well, and this is why the idea of oversharing is so frustrating, because even if you think that this person is a close ally, or if you're utilizing the argument he was making that he wanted to earn her trust by sharing with her, you are now painting a huge target on your back because now somebody else knows what you have. And there's this whole thing that could potentially exist out there, the steal advantage. I don't even know what it is. Knowledge is power, that whole thing.
Yes.
Which, he ends up having. And so you lose all of the power that you have if you share that with someone. Like, that's the whole point of having that damn thing, is that nobody knows that you have this power. And then you're like, hey, by the way, let me put it on a t-shirt and I'll just walk around camp and everyone's going to know that I've got this thing.
You ain't got the knowledge, you ain't got the power. So, yeah.
Yeah.
I felt like Carla was channeling you on this podcast. Oh, Geo has an advantage? Nope, get out of here.
Yeah.
We're going to get rid of that advantage.
Done.
And James basically said the same thing. Now, Cassidy wasn't happy at the last minute switchback, but it absolutely made sense that they would do this. One reason Cassidy was worried was something we didn't see, but which Lindsay talked about in her interviews, which was that she and Cassidy thought Geo had an idol. Carla, of course, knew better, but wasn't going to tell them that.
Because, oh my gosh, she's not oversharing.
Imagine that.
Crazy.
So I suspect that some of Cassidy's worry about voting Geo was not specifically about the advantage he just got, but about that idol. Like if Carla comes to her and says, nope, he doesn't have anything. He has knowledge is power. You can't do anything. And she's still concerned. Well, I think it's because she still thinks he has an idol. But since production didn't show them digging through his bag and reaching that conclusion, they had to kind of work it another way instead.
Right. Yeah.
So before we leave this rule, we should mention that Geo did try to find the idol at camp. He said he climbed every tree, flipped every stone. Apparently he didn't climb the tree where Carla found it. But, so he was doing that in terms of this rule. So we can move on to Appendix A, which is about the players keeping their end goals in mind when voting. And we, of course, talk about voting out the weak, then the strong, then the weak, then the strong. Geo's name apparently first came up after he didn't do so well in the very first challenge. And I even remember him being called out by Jeff.
Yes.
The interesting thing, as a matter of fact, that's why I started predicting him to go, like way back then. The interesting thing is that we once again have competing narratives. Geo said in his interviews that he only did that challenge because Ryan said he hurt his knee and couldn't do it. So he sort of shrugged that he could run, even though it, wasn't the running that was the hard part. It was carrying the heavy crates. But Lindsay told Mike Bloom last week, Geo was very adamant about him doing the running portion of it. He said that he was really great at running. And when that didn't pan out, I was concerned that Geo maybe wasn't aware of what his skill level was.
Yeah.
Now, there's no way for us to know the full extent of what happened and how it was perceived. But whatever led to it, the result was that he was immediately tagged as a weaker player.
Yeah.
And I would not say Geo was voted out at this point for being weak, But if Coco had lost early, it certainly would have been something we discussed. But
Oh, for sure.
he's had over a week and a half to change that since then.
Mm-hmm. And I feel like he said it was Jesse or James in one of his interviews, like regarding
Is it
the
James, not Ryan?
And
I
that
can't
kind of
remember now.
confused me a little bit because I was like, okay, if either like James or Ryan, why there was two of them?
Yeah.
Why not pick the other one then that
Yeah.
could probably carry a big heavy block more easily than Geo could have? But I don't know.
I don't either. Now, he mentioned in his interviews that in addition to not being the strongest, he was an alternate. And
Yes.
in one interview, things get a little hazy here because in one interview, it seemed like he was indicating that other players said things like they could vote him out because he wasn't supposed to be here anyway.
Which, no.
Yeah, but in another, it sounded more like that was a worry going through his brain about what people might be thinking. I tend to think it was the latter, since your response was exactly what I was thinking. I've never heard that as a reason to target someone.
No, I mean,
I
because
can't imagine any of his tribe mates saying that.
Right. I mean, because here's the thing: when you're going through the whole process of trying to get on the show, right? There are two separate, at least there used to be two separate trips to LA where you go for finals. And so you see some people at the finals, but you're at the one in December or you're at the one in February. So you're seeing the people who are at that one. So when I went to the one in December, I saw people who ended up on my season, but I didn't see everybody because there was people that were also there in February that I never saw. And you don't have an opportunity necessarily to connect with those people because you're not allowed to talk to those people. So you see them, you make some assumptions, some judgments, you take some notes, and you're like, okay, I remember this person, I like this person, or I think I'm going to like this person, fine. But at no point in time when you finally get out in the island, I mean, sure, people can share how they got on the show, and some people do. Some people lie about it. But it is interesting when you hear people's versions of how they were cast, and you can make whatever assumption from that you want, but it certainly wasn't something where any of us were like, oh, did you hear that person over there was like contacted by CBS directly and asked to apply, and now we're like going to like, no, even if you're an alternate, I mean, who cares? I mean, it doesn't change the fact that you still were put on the show.
Right.
And the only way they're going to learn that about you is either one, you tell them that information, or two, you were flown out so late into Fiji that then they realized there was a change.
Right.
But neither of those things we know. And so I feel like there's too much weight being put on that particular issue.
Yeah. Yeah. Totally agree. But, whatever the cause, which it wasn't that, I think it was probably being weak in challenges early. He was a target since that point. And of course, we know that, the early votes, if there's an early vote, any reason to target you. And yeah, once your name gets out there, sometimes it's hard to get rid of it. But again, he had a week and a half. He said he knew that he had to work to change it. Unfortunately, what did he do to try to make that happen?
He took over and started getting angry at people over cassava.
Well, sort of. He said he was helpful at camp and, was doing most of the cooking. How many times have we said that working hard at camp is not going to do crap for you?
Yeah.
That is not how you save yourself on Survivor.
I appreciate it. It's really great that person is doing all of the cooking. Thank you so much. But at the same time, no, it's not something that's going to. It's not a discussion where people are like, we can't vote out Geo. He cooks all the food. That doesn't.
If we vote him out, Cassidy's going to come in and cut the cassava the wrong way.
Damn it! The cassava drama continues. Yeah, no, that's definitely. I mean, and again, I fully appreciated everyone who brought in food, who cooked food. I mean, it was great. It was a lovely thing to have. But again, it doesn't factor in when you're looking at reasons to vote someone out, because
Right.
when that person's gone, guess what? You still have to eat.
Yeah.
And so someone will step up and cut the coconut or the cassava and feed everyone.
Yeah. Yeah. So then, it gets to the question, did the tribe make the right choice in voting Geo out? I would say yes. I believe Cassidy has a better chance of being more loyal. And of course, it got rid of the knowledge is power advantage.
Yes. And also the concerns that Cassidy had, where they were referring to her as Lindsay 2.0, are certainly going to be put at ease, because she's now seen that, no, they're with her, they're supporting her, and she doesn't need to have that concern for her two closest allies that are out there.
Right. Of course, Geo felt the same way when they voted out Lindsay. So
I'm just saying, you have helped calm the storm. Things are fine for now, but we'll see what happens, merge time, right?
Yes. All right. Well, with that, it's about time to wrap things up. What are your final thoughts?
Cassava.
That's it. One thought.
It's all about cassava.
Yeah.
I do think that Geo is someone who we had some concerns with initially when we were discussing pregame, the interviews, things that we heard. He didn't seem to have as much of a grasp on the game as many of the people did in their pregame interviews. And that was something that we were curious about, whether or not he was going to be able to go out there and do great, because his lack of Survivor gameplay seemed to kind of come across on the pages. And sure enough, when we saw him go out there, I think he suffered from what so many people suffer from when they start to play Survivor, is you go in like too hard and too fast, and you think you need to like run the show. And in order to do that, you have to be like full on. Everyone has to see it and everyone has to know. And you come across as kind of ordering people around, as opposed to someone like Carla, who is sitting back, still in charge, still making things happen, but it doesn't come across the same way because it's not so obvious. And so I really feel like Geo suffered from that, where he thought, I need to overcompensate for my lack in certain places. I did badly in the first challenge. I appear weak. Mm-hmm. I don't want them to see me as weak. So I'm going to step up and I'm going to appear strong and in control. And that is the perception I want people to have of me. But unfortunately, it backfired for him because he didn't let himself just be himself. Like, Geo should have gone out there and just been Geo. And then he probably would have found himself in a better place. He was lucky to have Ryan to have that second to his plans and thinking that they were running the world. I mean, great for the two of them. But unfortunately, Carla's really running things on that tribe. So I think Geo needed to tone it down. He needed to kind of sit back and needed to be Geo. And he wasn't. He was trying to be something he's not. And so unfortunately, now we're seeing the way that Geo, I think, wanted to play the game. And that's what we're hearing in the interviews, is what he thought about how he should have played the game is what we're now hearing. And so unfortunately for Geo, the cassava was a problem. It definitely added to significant issues that he had out there. And then Cassidy became the answer to that cassava drama. But unfortunately for Geo, it wasn't enough. And he had to go home.
Yeah, Ryan caused the Coco tribe to go to tribal council this time, but Geo was the one who paid the price. However, we can't blame Ryan for being the cause of Geo's loss. If Geo hadn't put himself into the position he was, it wouldn't have been an issue. Heck, if Geo and Ryan had actually been in the position they believed they were, he would have been fine. But they weren't in that position at all. I know Geo said that what we saw on TV was not an accurate reflection of where he felt he was. But we went over all of that item by item, exhibit by exhibit. And I'm sorry, but I can't side with what Geo said in his interviews, given the evidence and logic stacked against him. Geo was locked in with Ryan and thought he had Carla as well. He believed he was in control and didn't want to worry about working with Cassidy. His anger at her and distrust of her wouldn't allow him to consider the possibility. He did know that he needed to be in the majority, And he worked to make that happen, but he admitted he got too comfortable. I do think he might have had his doubts and suspicions earlier in the game. But once Carla and James joined him to vote out Lindsay, it seems like he probably believed he was locked in. And Ryan shared that belief, or else he never would have thrown the challenge. Carla outplayed them both. It was something of a toss-up as to which of them would go, and it would have been a more amusing storyline if Ryan had voted himself out. But just as Carla felt threatened by Lindsay asking too many questions and perhaps gaining information last week, she felt like she was in a bit of jeopardy again with Geo getting the advantage. Indeed, the name was appropriate because it's true that knowledge is power. People keep giving Carla knowledge, and she has been wielding the power.
Ooh.
This time, she used it to take out one of the guys who thought he was running the game and who would certainly have turned on her if she'd voted out Ryan instead. And that is why Geo lost.
Lovely.
So, all right, it's almost time for predictions. But first, I just want to remind everyone that if you want to get the rules in the poster form, go to robhasawebsite.com/yxlostfeed, scroll down, click order. And you can do the same. Yes, you could do the same with the t-shirt form, the checklist, the mug, you name it. You name it, we got it.
That's right.
So, yeah, again, robhasawebsite.com/yxlostfeed. Now, predictions. It's the merge. Yes, that face was perfect. Yes. It's sort of the merge.
We know
we know there won't be an hourglass, but I'm sure Jeff.
Thank the Lord. Thank you. Here. Thank you to Mr. Jeff Probst for learning his lesson. Doing away with that.
I don't know that you should thank him for fixing the problem that he solved, but okay.
I'm just saying he realized the error of his ways.
Yes. For now. But I'm sure that he still wants them to earn the merge.
Yeah.
You know, between that and then someone saying in the previews there's no place to hide, I suspect we're going to have another situation where half the players are safe and half aren't. And, you know, it's awfully hard to predict anything when we have literally no idea who might be safe.
Okay. I don't like that. I don't like that you think they're going to do that type of thing again.
Oh, yeah. I absolutely think he's going to do that again.
I don't like that. Well.
Sorry.
I have two options.
Okay.
Ryan.
Yes.
Because he's clearly got no one behind him at this point. And I feel like he would be an easy throwaway for Coco to just be like, hey, you know what?
Mm-hmm.
You can vote out Ryan. We fully support it. But there's that whole idea of like the merge boot person, right? Like that's a thing where people are like, oh, this is a perfect merge boot because they're great at challenges. There's this thing about that person. And I keep gravitating towards Noelle.
Well, let me do some setup first.
Yes, because there are a lot of things that.
Well, there's a lot of things. That's exactly right. There's a lot of things. So
there's no votes. Yes. There's idols. There's so much stuff.
So we know Jesse and Janine have no vote.
Yep.
We know that at least Carla knows Jesse and Janine have no vote because she knows that Geo had the advantage, which means the other two.
Oh, yes,
have no
because
vote.
She knew that they went. Okay, right. Yes.
Okay. Carla, Janine, Cody, and Gabler all have idols. Gablers must be used this tribal council.
So he's safe.
Which, by the way, would be interesting if he's in the safe group and his idol gets burned anyway because he's still at tribal council. But, I mean, I guess he could give it to someone.
Sure.
Now, it's possible that everyone on Baca could figure out that Carla and or Cody have idols if they start asking around to see who has been gathering beads.
Time out. Did you mention Noelle has a steal a vote?
That's later. I'm going through idols.
Okay.
So Now, I think that's unlikely to happen because so much will be going on that when are they going to have time to sit down and go, hey, by the way, has someone been gathering beads over here? Um, but it's possible.
It is.
Okay. Then, as you
Okay.
said, Noel has a vote steal. Now, since there are two people without votes, I have seen the question come up a few times. What happens if Noel tries to steal the vote of a person who doesn't have a vote?
Because let's stop there. Let's pause for just one moment.
Time out.
It makes the most sense for Noel to steal a vote from Baca because Baca has the most people, right?
But wouldn't she? Oh, yes, from Baca. Sorry.
Right. Because but we have Janine who has no vote. So I was very curious. I'm like, how does that play out? If she decides that she's going to steal a vote from Janine and Janine doesn't have a vote.
Well, I hope that it works the same as it would if a mugger tried to rob me and I had an empty wallet.
You get nothing.
Exactly. I mean, that would be the most amusing outcome to any steal a vote situation. It would be terrible for Noel, but it would be an amusing outcome to be like, okay, you steal the vote, and then she goes up there to vote, and instead she gets the ticket that says this person doesn't have
no
a vote.
vote. Go sit your ass down.
Yeah.
But she gets to vote once because she would have her vote.
Right.
And then the other vote. So, yeah. But however they would work that out. But this is the problem with all of these things being added to the game.
Oh, yeah.
Is that you then affect this idea that this construct where you have 5 and 4 and 4. Yep. Right. And the only way you're going to even that out is if the steal a vote comes into play and takes one from Baca, then you got 4, 4, 4. But you might not have that because.
No, then you have 5, 4, 4 a different way because you're stealing the vote.
Right. But that's what I'm saying. But then you're stealing. But if you end up stealing from Janine, it doesn't change anything.
Right. True. So all this in mind, where do we go from here?
Ugh.
Beats the hell out of me. I mean, okay. We know the men and women aren't getting along so great on Baca. We know Vesey was messy, but might have tightened up since then. We know Ryan could be upset at the rest of Coco. We know Vesey and Baca had teamed up on Coco before, and they could do it again, even though Coco is no longer the majority like they were. We know that. Now, going into specifics, this is actually going in the direction one of the directions you were headed. Ryan is a strong competitor who would be good to get out at this point in the game. I could see certainly Cassidy going along with it, possibly Carla and James as well, if they felt it could help their progress in the long run. So with that in mind, I basically convinced myself that Ryan will go because who else? Who knows otherwise?
Right. I mean, he's the most obvious person who kind of seems to be on his own island at this point. And so that could go one of two ways. As you've already indicated, Ryan could approach Baca and be like, Coco's done with me. What do you want? Like, I got it. Like, throw me into the mix. I'm here for you. So he could certainly use it as a bargaining tool. But I don't get that from Ryan. I don't get that gameplay from him at all. And so I feel like...
No, he'll tell them, it's okay. Sacrifice me. Leave me here at the merge. I won't make it to jury, but you will all go on without me.
Can you just lie down your couch? It's perfect. End scene. It's so good. Yeah. So, but I see Carla definitely throwing Ryan under the bus in a very Carla fashion, where it won't be like I'm throwing him under the bus, but you're going to know Carla's throwing him under the bus. Yeah. So I am leaning very heavily towards Ryan as well, because he certainly does seem to be the only one. And I was looking at the Baca tribe because you discussed Baca as well as having some issues. And this sounds crazy. I can't believe I'm about to say this, but I hang everything on Sammy, because I feel like Sammy, as much as he's frustrated with Gabler and his talks and explanations of things and how he's frustrated with the girls and he wants to be able to take them out, he is going to realize right now it's not the time. We've got the numbers. We're Baca strong. We're going to stay together and we're going to get through this initial merge and keep all of our numbers because that's going to be beneficial to him. So I really feel like Sammy will be the savior of Baca as far as how they're going to approach things. And Owen is just going to be like, score. I'm right there with you. But so I really do feel like the only real person that I can look to and say they're on their own, it really is Ryan. And but I feel like Noelle is that, like, she seems to be that merge boot type where they're like great in challenges. She's going to be a threat later. She's likely going to win if we've got a chance to take her out now. But she's got the steal a vote. But that's not going to necessarily, it's not an idol. It's a steal a vote. So, so that's kind of, Anyway, so I think it's Ryan. I feel like it's got to be Ryan.
We're both going with the same person.
I know. You know what? Maybe the season's becoming too predictable.
Well, apparently not, because we were wrong. I mean, just because we picked the same person doesn't mean it's going to happen.
Okay, nobody needs to know that.
Oh,
I need to remind them.
Okay.
Only when I'm right.
Yeah, then you remind.
Then we remind them all the time.
Over and over. Yes. So
you do the same thing.
Maybe not as much as you.
Oh, no. Let's just stop. You're half right. Do you remember this? David's half right.
But I mentioned it like once.
Whatever. So ridiculous. I'm going to make you a t-shirt. This is I'm half right.
I still want the David You're Right t-shirt.
Oh, you don't even have one of I have one of those. You have it.
Yeah.
I do. It's beautiful. I'm going to wear it next week.
All right. Of course, you have to wear it backwards to see.
I know, and I'm gonna cross it out and be like, David, you're not right.
No, you cannot graffiti that piece of art.
I can do whatever I want. It's my sweatshirt.
Still, it's protected artwork, protected architecture.
Interesting.
Yeah, we'll go with that.
I'll think about it.
Okay.
But we did have the same pick, so
yeah,
I'd be calling myself out too.
Yeah, kind of.
All
right. Well, as we wrap up, I want to encourage people to check out the RHAP patron program at robhasawebsite.com/patron. You get access to the Survivor Academy podcast, Patron 5 for 5, and much more. And when Rob isn't talking directly to everyone, there are the Facebook groups and Discord to keep you occupied with a great community of people. You can support shows like ours, everything on the network, by becoming a patron, getting all the perks. Again, go to robhasawebsite.com/patron or click the link at our robhasawebsite.com/yxlostfeed page. And once you get to the Facebook groups, make sure to say hello.
And you should say hello to us on Twitter. I am at Jessica Lewis 89, and he is at David Bloomberg. You should certainly, that was aggressive. That was perfect. It was like you practiced. You should definitely follow us both because we tweet throughout the week and also live tweet during the actual Survivor episodes. That's always fun to do. So I am again at Jessica Lewis 89. He is at David Bloomberg. Again, the aggressive point. And you should also follow David Bloomberg on his TikTok, as he has mentioned a couple of times on this podcast, but just a couple. Not that he wants to send anybody that direction, but he really does. He really does. Yeah. Check it out. I discussed the candy corns last week. I was going to put that up on I should do that. You love candy corn, so we're going to share that with the world. Yes. But he is at David_Bloomberg for his TikTok. So check it out. Because he's retired, I'm just going to tell you all, listen, David, you don't need to get involved in this, but he's got a lot of time on his hands. He's watching a lot of reality TV. He's making a lot of TikToks. So let's support him, okay? Let's support him.
That's right. Survivor, Amazing Race, The Real Love Boat.
I was just going to say, The Real Love Boat? Yeah. You mean the 10 people that got on a cruise with a whole bunch of regular people who are not on a television program, and now they're part of a show that there's a captain? okay.
Yeah.
I'm sure that's the guy driving the boat.
No, he's a real captain. He's just not captaining right. I found an interview.
He's not actually captaining the boat they're on.
Right. But he is a captain of
and
that
that's fine.
ship.
You can be a captain, just like, I went on Survivor and I said I was a photographer when I'm really a lawyer. People can say certain things about themselves. It doesn't mean that's what you're doing. He's on the Love Boat as the captain, but he's not captaining the ship. He's just on a show.
Hey, he's matchmaking.
I just want to know, were the other people on the boat aware this was happening?
Oh yeah, you could see them in the background sometimes. I'd swear I thought that I heard some applause in this most recent episode. I could be wrong about that.
I feel like I'd be like, wait, there's a reality TV show being filmed on the cruise that I paid money to go on. I don't know. I feel like that would be strange.
I'm surprised there aren't been more shots. But yes,
the Love Boat.
It's the real Love Boat, and
2022 style.
Yes, and I have done TikToks, mostly making fun of the contestants because
just hope they don't all get COVID and get stuck out in the middle of the
I think only one of them did so far, but they said he had a health issue.
Oh my gosh, I can't. But anyway, you should definitely check out his TikToks because there's all kinds of incredible content, including candy corns.
Yes. And also, I copy most of those over to Instagram on a one-day delay where I'm david.e.bloomberg. I haven't gotten around to changing that or looking into changing that. And Jessica, of course, is Jessica Lewis 6789.
Yes. Lots of things, lots of social media.
Yes, I wanted to mention I will be making a guest appearance on the Truth Unrestricted podcast, which is hosted by Spencer Watson. I met Spencer on Twitter through Survivor stuff, but we also have a lot of shared opinions on other matters. And this particular episode deals with lying, both in real life and more specifically in games like Survivor.
I love this. When is this happening?
It should be available maybe Sunday, maybe early next week.
I love it.
And of course, I will post about it on Twitter. The podcast isn't as long as this one. And I think it was a fun conversation. So yeah, check that out.
Nice. Like it.
And of course, make sure everyone is subscribed to all the RHAP Survivor podcasts by going to our YX Lost feed page. You'll find all the great content there, the know-it-alls, the Stock Watch, Survivor International, the B&B, all the other interviews, you name it, it's there. I actually forgot earlier today, Ethan, Rob was interviewing Ethan about this episode, and I wanted to try to listen to that, but I had way too much going on. So hopefully he didn't say it. Well, hopefully he did say something totally, revealing all. But hopefully whatever he said doesn't, make this obsolete. But because
I guess we'll just have to find out.
That's right. I'm sure it won't be.
And I would like to thank Scott St. Pierre for all of the editing that he does, not only for the Why Blank Lost podcast, but all of the podcasts on the RHAP channel. And thank you, Scott, for all of the work that you do. Also, thank you to Will from America for the incredible theme song that you've created for Why Blank Lost. We truly appreciate it. Super catchy. So thank you, everyone who supports us and helps us and makes this all possible.
That's right.
And thank you, David Bloomberg, for opting to do a podcast on a Thursday night, knowing I have to go to work tomorrow because, I don't know, I'm not retired. Anyway, we got through it. I hope you have a fabulous weekend.
Thank you. And
I appreciate it very much.
Yes. Well, thank you. Thank you for adjusting our schedule so we could celebrate Rob's birthday.
Yes, of course. It's all about Rob.
Yes. And we will be back in a week to find out what the heck happens at the merge or not merge. And who knows what new things we'll find. But we'll work our way through it just like we always do. We'll see you then. Bye.
Bye.